Welcome to this quantum security and defense presentation. Thank you for being a valued member of our community. Zeki C. Seskir is a researcher in the field of technology assessment at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, KIT, Institute for Technology Assessment and Systems Analysis, and coordinator of the project QuTec, Quantum Technology Innovations for Society. He conducts landscaping studies on quantum technology ecosystems, education and outreach research in quantum technology, and conceptual exploration for ELSA research for quantum technology. His background is in science and technology policy studies and quantum information science. He published on topics such as the quantum technology startup ecosystem, publication and patent landscapes, quantum radar, many worlds interpretation, stakeholder engagement, and democratization of quantum technology. His research interests cover a wide range of topics, from quantum games to innovation ecosystems.
Thank you. Thank you for the great introduction, and thanks for the invite. It's a privilege to be here. So, as introduced, I'm Zeki, and today I will talk to you about what does the recent export controls developments for quantum computers might mean for the quantum ecosystem in general. As introduced, I'm a researcher at KIT in Germany, Karlsruhe, so if you see anything interesting for you during this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me via email or connect me on LinkedIn. And I've been taught that any presentation with more than 10 slides should have an outline, so here's mine. And I apologize for those of you who have already seen a couple of my presentations before. Since I'm in Germany, I'm obliged to recycle slides as well, so some of the slides will be the same. And some of the jokes will be the same as well. So I will give a brief introduction about the topics we have been working on. I will talk quite a bit about export controls, what, who, why, what do they mean? And then I will conclude, and hopefully we will have some time for questions and discussions. I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective. First, a disclaimer. So the name of our institute is Institute for Technology Assessment and Systems Analysis, but in German it is Institute für Technik Folgenabschätzung. So we are not necessarily interested in the technologies themselves, but we are more interested in the intended and unintended consequences of these technologies. On that front, we collaborate heavily with the Office of Technology Assessment at the German Bundestag, that's the German Parliament in Berlin, and the panel for the future of science and technology at the European Parliament, which is in Brussels. As introduced by Steve, our project is called QuTec, Quantum Technology for Society. We wanted to keep it a bit vague, so that, because it's an exploratory project, and our main topics are, again, as introduced, landscaping, education outreach, and concept exploration and operationalization. So, export controls. Okay, I checked the chat, sorry. So, export controls. Why are we interested? Just for disclaimer, and to make it clear that my background is in physics and science and technology policy. It's not in law. I'm not a legal expert. So you shouldn't take anything I say on face value. You should also do your own research and kind of look behind it. But in this presentation, I will not try to convey you the details of these export control regulations, but the policy logic behind them, and how are they being kind of perceived and kind of considered by the quantum community at large. So when we are talking about these things called the export controls, which wasn't an issue until a couple of years ago for quantum in general, but now it's a big topic, there are different types. So the first type is product controls, second type is destination controls, there's end user controls and end use controls. So these are very self-explanatory for this kind of an audience, but it's basically what are you interested in controlling? Are you interested in controlling the products themselves? Are you interested in controlling the destination of these products? Are you interested in controlling the end users, so like blacklisting certain entities or individuals, or the end user? Like you can use the sensor for medical purposes, but not for defense and security purposes. Now, one point that was kind of surprising for me when I learned it a couple of years ago was that when we are talking about export controls, people usually think about the items themselves, like the laptop, the device, the phones, the chips, all those things. But it doesn't only cover the physical product. It also covers anything from design to data to technical assistance to details to even giving a talk. So it is a very, depending on who and how these are being interpreted, it has a very wide web that it can cast if you're trying to implement these kind of export controls. So if you want to know the what of quantum export controls on quantum computers, it looks like this right now. So basically, there's a certain number of qubits with a certain amount of error rate and the connectivity, and then there's like different entries on okay, so if you have more than 2000 fully controlled connected working physical qubits, you need a license. If you have more than 1000, fewer than 2000, with this error rate, you need a license. So basically, these are giving you some ballpark figures of what the governments would accept exports without going through the licensing process. And for any of the quantum information experts or the quantum computer folks in the audience, these numbers may look rather strange because like with 35 qubits, with 3 9 errors, there's not much that you can do. And that was actually noticed quite early on by a lot of people in the field, such that there was this article in New Scientist earlier this year, basically calling these mysterious export controls and no scientific reasoning behind them. And they can be traced back to secret international discussions, which is all like sounding very conspicuous for scientists. But so which countries are involved? So basically, a lot of the so-called Western Alliance, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Spain, Netherlands, United Kingdom, United States, and you can also include Iceland, Norway, other countries as well. So there will be, this list will probably extend in the coming months and years. And the reason why all these different countries, with some of them even have different legal structures, are adopting the same export control rules, is that there are actually exceptions for countries adopting the same regulation. So if you are a US company trying to sell something to Germany, and Germany has the exact same export control regulations, or almost exact, that the US has, then the licensing process is much easier, sometimes not even needed. So that kind of means that if all these countries share a single export controls regime and legislation, then it is much easier to trade between them these export controls, product and knowledge and design and data and all that stuff. And the recent developments in Germany and also in US basically shows that these export controls are not going to be limited to just qubit devices or quantum computers. They are being expanded to cover a lot of supporting hardware as well. And you can also think about these as they're not just for quantum computers, they are also very relevant for semiconductor industry. So the question is, why is this happening? Why is there all these countries adopting these mysterious, export control regulations? So one reason is that previously, when it came to the export control for conventional arms and dual-use goods and technologies, there was the Wattenaar arrangement. And this has been, if I'm not mistaken, this was mid-90s, which means it has been around for almost 20 years. Oh, no, even almost 30 years, yeah. But as you can see from the countries, or the signatories of the arrangement, there are some, basically Russia, that is just not playing along, which basically means that anything that you want to put on the list at Wattenaar is now being blocked by Russia. So all these other countries now have to come up with their national or basically their own export control regulations and bilateral agreements with other countries. And of course, one of the reasons that this is becoming important is, world is becoming a more and more dangerous place. And as the Institute for Economics and Peace has stated, peace is becoming a luxury, which kind of means that there's more and more worries about technologies and potential military uses of these emerging and relatively powerful technologies. And of course, this is a security and defense group, and you have all of you have seen this thing. So when we talk about quantum technologies and its potential uses in like warfare, there are many both potential and recently relatively more practical implementations for different purposes, from electronic warfare to radars to mapping to PNG and all that stuff. And also, quantum can be certain quantum technologies can be used to support the recently booming space sector, and there are a lot of people who are kind of worried about militarization of space, and there are a lot of efforts going into developing countermeasures and information security and communication security on space assets. And of course, these are not worries that are taken lightly by the relevant organizations. For example, the European Commission is very active in carrying out these risk assessments, creating this legislative frameworks and backgrounds, and also trying to align the European policy, because European Union has 27 member states, trying to align all these regulations from a European perspective. And meanwhile, NATO also released its quantum strategy. I say released, but we can't read it. I mean, some of us can't read it because it's not released, but at least we can read the summary of it. And one main point that is very relevant for the export controls issue is the supply chain, or value chain, depending on how you want to formulate them. And there's this general tendency or belief that we are moving to a much less globalized state of international trade. And the old supply chains and value chains will be replaced by more local ones, and more ones that are more focused on like friendly relationships between countries rather than having a globally open trade ecosystem. And as quantum technologies is being recognized or identified as a critical technology, then the supply chain issue is also becoming an relevant topic for this kind of analysis. You can find these reports. I'm not going to go into anything in detail, but I know that these kind of studies are being carried out in the US as well to try to identify, which supply chain dependencies exist, how serious and how potentially harmful they are, both for advantage and disadvantage purposes. Are there any chokeholds, choke points of in these supply chains, and can they be controlled? So these are topics of active research and study. So what does it mean for the ecosystem? So first thing it means is that it will most likely lead to fragmented market, which means there will probably be a European market with some connections with US. There will be the North American market, maybe with Japan. There will be the Asian market. So it's like there will be a relative fragmentation of markets. What does this mean? Especially for startup, it definitely means lower market caps because your potential market size shrinks. It fragments, and it might also mean supply chain issues because these are relatively complex technologies. They require a lot of supporting hardware, and these hardware are relatively niche, which means there aren't that many vendors producing these supporting hardware. So if you take out a couple of them on the supply chain, then it might become an additional burden on the companies. It definitely means increased compliance costs, which leads to higher overall costs, harder for SMEs. And also I hear a lot it is becoming very difficult and also, costly in terms of time and energy and, patience about hiring internationally, especially in countries like US and a bit in the European Union. And of course, it means that there will be collaboration barriers. It might slow down innovation. There are a lot of discussions around this actually because export controls doesn't necessarily slow down innovation. This local innovation might be actually quicker than a global cooperative environment. But it will definitely lead to more redundancies and increase the cost of innovation and the total cost of innovation. So there will be a lot of different actors trying out practically the same things from their own time instead of waiting for others to do it, because even if the others can do it, they won't have access to it. And is it necessarily a bit bad? Well, it depends on the stakeholder position. So if you are the policymaker who is very concerned, or if your group is very concerned about the misuse of these technologies, especially in the military domain, you might prefer to have lower market caps for your companies because that's not your priority. So we shouldn't think of this as a universally good thing or a universal bad thing. It depends on where you stand in the ecosystem and also how these export controls are being implemented, because right now there is a huge confusion about the actual implementation of these regulations as well. So returning back to the New Scientist article on mysterious export controls, I would say that they're not mysterious at all. And the argument that there doesn't seem to be any scientific reason behind it is that this is not done for any scientific purpose. This is a policy decision, and there's a policy reason behind it. It's not a scientific reason behind it. So that's why it is mysterious for the scientists. But as someone who has some background in science and technology policy studies, this was actually covered in one of our early lectures in the master's program. Like, this is basically something called signaling. So signaling is a tool that is used in these kind of policy decisions that you, as a policymaker, signal that you expect the communities and the stakeholders to behave in a certain way. There are many different tools for signaling, and this kind of regulation and legislation are definitely one of them. So I would say that there's nothing mysterious going on, but that there's a very particular policy mindset, or let's say the general approach from a policy perspective that is being signaled to the scientists and researchers in the field, and they are finding it very mysterious because it's not something that they have in their priorities or like in their vocabulary, so to speak. And what we argue is that these regulations that you have seen with certain qubit numbers and error rates and technical details, they don't matter much. The bar is set intentionally low, basically signaling that we will not allow any useful quantum computer to be exported without a license. So this is a very clear signal given to the industry and the companies and the investors and the researchers that these numbers, they are there for a particular reason, and the reason is not scientific. The reason is that the policymakers want to give a very clear signal about what they expect. And I would say that it's already working. I mean, of course, I can only say this anecdotally, but any kind of VC or investors that I speak in the conferences or through other means, they are heavily regionally focused. So if they're in EU, they focus in EU. If they're in US, they focus in US. So they don't even consider any kind of uncertain markets because they don't know what will happen in a legislative setting in 6 months, for example. So this is if you, from a policy perspective, if you want to keep European investors in Europe and the American investors in US, it is definitely working already. And something we call placeholder regulation is that these numbers, the exact calculations and values, these are basically a placeholder figures. And as the technology matures, the regulatory frameworks will also evolve. So these numbers, these error rates, all this stuff, they won't stay like this. I mean, maybe for quantum computers, they can stay like this, but as they will expand, there will be more details added to these lists. And how to deal with this? So maybe, especially those of you from Europe, so this is Grangier, this is Thierry Berton, our former European Commissioner for the internal EU markets. So there are efforts in the ecosystem trying to focus on how to navigate these developments, because these developments are happening. They will continue to happen. And it's not really up to the scientists and the researchers to set the tone anymore. It is a much more diverse ecosystem, let's say. And the national innovation initiatives on quantum, like Quantum Delta NL in Netherlands, we have our own in Germany. They are trying to provide these kind of supports to their local ecosystems on how to navigate these developments. And also, I would say that it's not just about regional collaboration or navigation. We should also try to figure out how to navigate these basically this new regime of trade relations between regions as well. So that's why, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Singapore. We organized this event there with the colleagues at SG Innovate and RSIF and CQT. So the idea is these new developments need to be taken into account by the ecosystem, and we need to think and talk about them in a more understanding manner. So it's like we can't just set them aside by telling that, oh, they are stupid, they don't mean anything, like they're mysterious, they don't have any scientific reason and stuff like that. And this is happening. Actually, people are talking. There's an event in Geneva in 1 month, organized by the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. So if you are interested, you can also join online. So this is organized by one of our colleagues, Dong-Young Cho, professor. And yeah, it's not just them. So there will be almost the same time. there will be another event organized by the United Nations Institute for Computing Center in The Hague. So if you're in Netherlands, you can check this out. And I mean, just to give a summary and conclusion, like the export controls are most probably, I can't predict the future with 100% precision, but they are most probably here to stay. They will expand beyond just quantum computers, and as we've seen in the German case, they're already expanding. They don't only cover physical items, they cover design, technical systems, and other stuff. Currently, the regulations are rather low, and they serve a signaling purpose. But in time, they will evolve as the technology matures, because we are in a very early stage of these. I mean, just to give you some idea that in an innovation like approach that you have 4 different phases of a technology, we are still in phase 1 for quantum computers. So there is a long road ahead for these technologies to evolve and mature. And of course, we should always keep in mind that different stakeholders have different priorities, risks, opportunities related to these developments. So there is no impact or uniform impact over the entire ecosystem. And with that being said, I would like to thank you for your attention and open the floor for discussion if I have any time left. This I might not have as well.
You go, Michal. And thank you, Zeki, for the presentation.
Thank you for the invite. Hi, Michal.
Good to see you. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I hope to see you in Hague, where I will be very likely.
I will be at Lisbon, because for some reason it's overlapping with the QTC. I don't really understand why.
Okay, no problem. To my question, from the export control perspective, what you describe, you basically describe normal condition in the defense industry. Is it possible to, let's say, check this defense industry, because it's quite specific, for example, from the perspective of startups, because there are not many startups and their let's say, level of survivability is very low. Maybe it could be interesting to see the defense industry and learn what to avoid in quantum in case it will be, let's say, heavily affected by export controls.
It kind of depends, because I don't think the real impact will be for the people in the quantum fields who are doing defense stuff. So, because that's what you expect, right? If you're in defense, if you're in security, you expect a certain level of compliance costs and compliance processes for these. But if you are doing a very civilian-oriented, if you are trying to run your company in a very civilian applications-oriented manner, then these are still affecting you, but you're not expecting them. So all these additional bureaucratic burden and additional steps that you need to go through, that probably as a startup founder you didn't expect. So those will be the ones who will be truly negatively affected. And one point I think is very important here to highlight is that those will be the ones who will be pushing against these regulations. So when we think about policy frameworks, regulations, like there's always this assumption that it's very top down. So if there's this regulation, everybody has to abide by, it's set in stone and all that stuff. But no, these are all negotiations between different stakeholders. And if these are not really well implemented, if these only cause extended licensing times, uncertainty in terms of whether there will be certain deal approved or not, then there will be a lot of pushbacks, and it will cause a lot of ruckus in the ecosystem. I definitely agree with what you say. If you are in quantum and defense, you should definitely take some mentorship or service or something from other defense industries or the consultants out there on how you should navigate this, because just accept that even if for civilian applications and use cases, these export controls at some point might be relaxed, for defense, they're not definitely not going to be relaxed at any point. So you just need to learn how to live with them and navigate around them. One point that is usually raised for especially for quantum computing industry is that this will probably favor larger companies quite a bit, because they already have the resources, they already have the know-how on how to deal with these regulatory additional burdens like compliance costs. But smaller companies, they don't. So there will be an unfair or unequal, depending on how you look at it, a burden on smaller quantum computing companies.